Hey guys, that's right. D here is back with a brand new episode of Table Cheese with Anton Sixxx and myself. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and follow. And guess what? Enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this very special episode of Table Cheese revolving around The Last of Us HBO. One of my favorite games of all time turned into... We'll see how I feel about the show itself. But joining me, as always, on Table Cheese, we have Dee of FTO Nerd Talk.
Dude, a very ominous opening you just came there. This show is a masterpiece, and you damn well know it. Hey guys, it's good to be here.
All right. So, before recording, and this will be a special treat for video viewers, I had to hit the shelf and grab my original copy of The Last of Us from, I believe, 2012, and then my copy of The Last of Us Part 2, Last of Us Remastered, physically from 2013.
History. You're holding history in your hands right now, man. It's nuts.
And I mean, these are my original copies. These are the copies that I played through the game. Like, that PS3 disc was in my PS3 when I originally played the game the first time, and that PS4 disc was in my PS4 when I replayed it for the first time. So,
you know, we were talking about it before earlier in the show about different issues of comic books and like how like the first printing is always most important. You got the first printing of both of those games right now. Like you gotta feel pretty good, man.
Oh yeah. I wonder if this PS4 game is in the era. No, I didn't start doing that yet. So what I started doing with physical games is, because I primarily get my physical games from GameStop, I will put the receipt in the game case.
Ooh.
Especially if it's like a pre-order, so like I know the date the game came in.
I like that. That's nice, dude. Little gamer tip for you guys out there. I dig it.
Yeah, for me, like, because not to get off on this whole tangent already in the Last of Us episode, but
welcome to the show, guys.
I'll go to Goodwill, and a lot of times I'll pick up the games that have people literal printouts of cheat codes for GTA and stuff like that. So a lot of the used games that I pick up from Goodwill or things like that, one of the things, I always open it, check it, and see like if it's complete in box. Like a lot of these older games came with maps and like manuals.
Which is sometimes worth more than the game itself. Yeah. Which is like sometimes like more impressive than like the actual physical game itself and have like those instruction manuals that go along with it. Oh man, I used to do that, but I never went there to do it for that reason. I just went there like to find like cheap PlayStations or cheap Xboxes and get some games. I never thought about like going at it for that collector mindset. That's nice. But
well, yeah, for me that's a great way. 360 games, like I don't have a really big collection. PS2 games, I don't have a really big collection. And there's some PSP gems that, you know, will just float up at Goodwill for...
Take me with you one day, dude. We gotta like archive that shit. Takes like some videos of like you picking up PS2 games from different shops. I'm in. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we can hit up all the Goodwills within 285.
And pawn shops. Don't forget about the pawn shops.
Pawn shops, I feel like more so realize sometimes what they have over a Goodwill.
All right, I'll give you that. Yeah. No,
yeah, like a pawn shop will, like, they'll probably have something better than a Goodwill will have, but they'll be more aware of the value of what they have than a Goodwill will be.
You sound like my wife. She tells me the same thing about pawn shops. Like stop going to pawn shops. They rip you off with pawn shops. Goodwill, they know nothing. They just do their jobs and have it be that. Yeah.
Right. The amount of times I've found like actual like legit good games in the DVD section at a Goodwill. Like, it's video games are over here, and this is clearly a pile of like every Madden, like 3 copies of every Madden on every system from like the years 2008 through like 2012, which I'm not that guy. Like, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's for them, but that's
to take a quick pause to talk about it. Have you gone to the Smyrna thrift store? Have you gone there before? On South Carl Drive? Give it a shot one day. They got a good selection of games there. Just put it out there to you.
Okay.
Just toss it out there. But this is like I watched this show. I watched it because I know I was going to watch it, and I told this story quite a few times in different podcasts. Like I watched the first 15 minutes on MK Ice and Fire. I was like, I'm not going to watch any more of this game. One, because it's extremely sad, and two, it's going to get made into a TV show or a movie. And I was right. And
you waited a long time. I mean, it's been
I
about
did.
a decade.
I know, and I always wanted to go back because they made so many like different parts to it, but I just didn't. I didn't go back to it. Yeah.
Well, it's still only just part 1 and part 2.
Whew. Isn't there like DLCs though?
Well, the DLC is Left Behind. So, well, spoilers.
Get into it.
I will most likely be spoiling Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 in its entirety. If you haven't had a chance to play it, I will lean off of the Last of Us Part 2 spoilers, but when we get to the end of the series, there are some things that I know Dee probably didn't pick up on that directly lead into the Last of Us Part 2 in a way that wasn't emphasized in the game. So I'll try and, reserve my spoilers for just part 1 of the story and the Left Behind DLC. But
we will be spoiling the episode, like every episode of the season so far. Just letting you guys know.
This is a season 1 review, full spoilers.
Full spoilers.
And there will be things that I have to go into that happened in the second game because of the context the show added to them. And I can see how they'll be paid off in the second season. But for anime only, I'll try and not go in that direction. But there are certain things I just have to. Like if I'm doing a Last of Us HBO review, I have
You're
to
getting into it. You're getting into it, and that's why I wanted to do this with you. Like you in particular. Like I thought about doing just like a review on TikTok. It's like 60 seconds long and talking about like what I thought about the show. Like no, Anton, like he talks about this game much. He talks about Monster Hunter, so I should probably do a podcast with him about this.
Well, there was a period of time that The Last of Us, the original, before there was a part 2, before we knew about the HBO show, there was a period of time where the original Last of Us was my favorite game.
Okay, that makes sense. Like I feel that. Like I feel that same way about God of War. So I hear you. I know that feeling. I know how like that can get you in your feels. You get very passionate and protective of it. So I hear you.
Right. And so, for the show is being led by Neil Druckmann, the director, one of the leads on the game, because there's all the controversy about how Bruce Straley wasn't credited anywhere in the show, even though it was Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley that made the original Last of Us.
Right.
And the show's just an adaptation. And while Neil is involved, Bruce isn't involved with Naughty Dog anymore. I think he might have moved on to a new studio, or he might have just retired. Might have just stepped away from games entirely. As far as like being on the creative side. But to start off, I just want to say The Last of Us HBO show it's a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. There are things they could do about it. Like, no show is perfect, no season of television is perfect, no movie is perfect, no game is perfect. But just the level of care, the level of detail, the level of production, the budget that was put behind it, the trust that was put in the creators in realizing the narrative of this game and the world of this game. Because it'd just be one thing if they kind of nailed the characters and nailed like the plot points, but
right.
There's the additional layer on top of that of nailing the atmosphere, nailing the mood, nailing the world.
We got that in our notes. We're gonna talk about that also, because like I feel like that in itself is a character that we gotta take note of. Like, is the atmosphere, is the world around, like it's a part of the story that is Last of Us.
Right. And so I guess the first direction I'll try and go is with Pedro Pascal and his portrayal of Joel. For me personally, you could see Troy Baker and Joel in the game. It's like the Last of Us is one of those shining examples of performance capture, where it's not just facial capture, it's not just vocal capture, it is full on. You are acting out these scenes in a mocap suit, and they are, and the whole time they have a little GoPro directed at your face, and you have tracking points to just transition your actual movement as a real person and your likeness and all of these things about the person portraying this character, like transferring it directly one to one into animations in a game. Like some of the most impactful scenes are just those two characters legitimately in a room in mocap suits having a conversation and acting out those roles.
Yeah.
So for me, Joel, like Ellie, especially in the original Last of Us, Ellie kind of. There are a lot of different actresses I could have seen filling that role, but Joel would have been one that was a lot harder to nail. Like if you asked me 10 years ago who would be the best actor for Joel, I don't even think Pedro Pascal had the level of relevance that he has now.
He didn't know.
And so I, for a long time, couldn't give you a good answer. And fortunately for me, the show came along and gave me a Joel that there would be times where, like, my Sunday night ritual, like, we'll watch House of the Dragon, we'll watch Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, we'll watch The Last of Us, we'll watch Thelma, we'll watch something on HBO, and I'll be folding laundry, and there'll be times where I need to pause whatever's going on. And I remember there was a scene, the sniper scene, where Ellie's running down the road. I think Sam and Henry were in that episode, and Joel is just sniping out the window, like providing Overwatch for them. And I paused it, and it's just Pedro Pascal. I'm like, that's Joel. Like this still frame of this random episode in the middle of the series is that character. There is. I'm like, this is a screenshot of Joel.
I feel like seeing Pedro Pascal, whom I also loved in this role. Like I'm not as familiar with Joel as you are from the game, but from what I've seen, like and what I've seen recently, like in different captions of it, like Pedro Pascal does a great job of capturing his character. But I feel like if anyone else that did this like X amount of years ago when like they did do an adaptation of this before Pedro Pascal had like the chance to do it, they wouldn't bring what Pedro brought to this. And Pedro Pascal brought a little bit less himself and a little bit more like of the game character into this that like most people are familiar with, and put like some rawness into it, man. Like he made it more real than what we saw in the game. Also, I don't think many other actors, even A-list actors, could pull that off.
And I mean, that's HBO. So, like, one of the things leading into this that had me super excited, for me, like, video game adaptations can hit or they can miss. We have, for every Cyberpunk Edge Runners, we have a Tekken Bloodlines.
Gotcha.
So, for every, like, knock it out the park, for every Castlevania, for every Witcher, we have a Street Fighter the movie. And as much as I love it, we have Advent Children. Because I have 4K Blu-rays of both Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15 and Advent Children Complete. And neither of those are good movies. Like,
be real. Like let's be real.
Right.
Like, they
I love them to death, but they're not good movies. But it feels good to have another one of these to add to the collection of Arcane, Cyberpunk, Witcher, Castlevania, to add to this treasure trove of like video game adaptations that are just stellar. Like, you want to get into gaming? You're into TV, you're into movies, you're into like watch these things and then go play the game based on it, and that'll translate. Like, I don't know if you saw the sales statistics on how much The Last of Us Remastered on PS4
It got
and The
over
Last of
200%.
Us, right, and The Last of
Yeah.
Us Part 1, both of those shot up the monthly sales charts through the
Yep.
entire run of the show.
It did the same thing that Edge Runners did for the game. Yeah.
Right. But the thing with Edge Runners is Cyberpunk's still a relatively contemporary and modern game. People were buying 2013's The Last of Us Remastered.
Yeah.
All over again because you could play. There are over 100 million PS4s out there. Every single one of them is capable of playing The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2.
And when you see so many like side by sides out there as well, like it's wild. Like you see the one scene that we're going to be talking about, also the one scene where you see Ellie meet up with the Zealots up in the north. Like you see that side by side, almost identical to the video game. You see like the last episode, almost identical, like to the episode. Like it's like the game like oftentimes mirror like the TV show, or the TV show mirrors the game, and they're flawless with it. Like the only thing that was a little bit different, which we're also going to get into, is about like Frank and Bill, and that I think for a lot of people is what got them hooked on this show. I know like a lot of folks that my wife talked with about this. She told them like people who aren't into stuff like this, like apocalyptic shows, who are into total sadness type shows, which is what this is. They heard about Frank and Bill, and that completely changed their output of this show. Like it completely changed like how they saw this, how they went about liking this show, and like it really like changed the tone, I think, of the show also.
And for me, those two flashback episodes, the Bill and Frank and the Ellie and Riley flashback episodes,
yes,
those two just as standalone episodes of television are just, because I feel like a lot of the other episodes in the series, you kind of need the context. You need the context of Joel and Ellie's story,
right,
to support that, to back that up, to like have their relationship grow over the season.
Yeah,
but the Bill and Frank episode and the Ellie and Riley episode, the Ellie and Riley episode, for those who aren't familiar with the game, was a DLC add-on that came out the February after the game came out. It came out Valentine's Day. And so playing that...
What a gift.
Right.
Jeez.
I definitely spent that Valentine's Day playing a love story between Ellie and Riley, and...
bawling your eyes out afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, like...
yeah. It was a rough one, like, and I'm with you, 100%. I'm with you, like probably some of the best episodes in TV. The Bill and Frank episode, it opened my eyes. Like, okay, like I was invested before. Like, let's do this. Like, you do this. This is what you're gonna show me. Like, The Walking Dead ain't got nothing on something like this. This is like something entirely different I was expecting to see, and like I'm sold.
Right.
You know, the Ellie and Riley episode that kicked me in my gut. And like I didn't get back up, and they wouldn't let me get back up for the rest of the season.
And so the Bill and Frank episode, the reason that's particularly special for me, like I played this game multiple times. Bill is a character you encounter in the game, so like they already handled his entire story arc as a character differently in this show than they did in the game.
Right.
But Bill's alive in the game, and Frank is a partner that you can read about through collectibles and like environmental storytelling and things like that. It's never something that has been tackled head on, and with the depth and with the care that it was tackled in the show.
No words. Like for those of you who don't know, like if you didn't watch it but you still listen to the podcast, like they're a couple. Both of these men are couples, and like their interactions, their origin story, as you would say. It was a little weary in the beginning, but man,
Nick Offerman killed it from second one on the screen for me.
Good
Nick Offerman
God.
As Bill, like that was inspired casting when they started talking about what actors and actresses would be playing what characters in the game. Nick Offerman as Bill was inspired from minute one, and then he showed up on screen of like the government like fucks aren't gonna like come in here and mess with what I got going on. Like he absolutely murdered that performance.
He did. He did. Like I didn't know he had range like that either, man. We all know Offerman's good. We know Offerman's a good actor, but range like that, dude, bro.
I know I've seen like trailers, and I think I've seen one of his more serious roles. But that's one thing I've learned over probably like the past decade is never underestimate the power of a comedic actor. Like comedians, stand up, like the level of thinking on your feet and like working with what you got that you have to have.
You're not wrong there.
Because uncut gems.
Yeah. I mean, we can go from Adam Sandler. You can go to like even Will Smith. Like he's like probably like one of the most famous like comedic actors to go that route. So like yeah, I hear you. I hear you completely.
Right,
man. Whew, like it got me. It got me good. It got me like right in my feels. Like in. Let me ask you this before we go any further. Like, what was your standout episode in this?
I'd have to say Bill and Frank just because that was the most deviated from the game itself. So, like, that was an entirely new experience I was having within this story that I knew. Like, all the other major plot points that kind of went on throughout the rest of the entire season, I knew what was going to happen. But the good thing is the Bill and Frank episode showed me not to just expect the game verbatim. And so even when like shocking things like the Sam and Henry episode, like when those things happened, I went in not knowing until it happened what was going to happen.
These episodes had like some crazy titles too. Like the Bill and Frank episode we keep talking about is called Long Time. And like for me, like the episode that really stood out for me is like the last episode of the season. It's Look for the Light, and the first 20 minutes of Look for the Light. You see what happened with Ellie.
Well, isn't that the shortest episode of the entire season? That's my one qualm with the final episode. And I see a lot of criticism of people saying it felt rushed overall.
I didn't get that vibe. I didn't get that vibe at all.
I felt it because there were certain times where the show expected you, and I mean maybe as like a show viewer, they did a better job at this. But The Last of Us game, you're spending literal hours, like growing your relationship with Ellie, where you don't have as much time. You're not going through combat encounters with Ellie. You're not having Ellie. Like, you're in an intense fist fight, and Ellie's like, look out behind you. And a clicker runs from off screen and, like, tackles you to the ground. There are a lot of experiences that happen in the game. And, like, the way the game just gives you a lot more time and a lot more room and a lot more just, like, kind of off the cuff like events to happen to like enforce it, like to show this bond growing because it just has a flat out longer run time. But I'll
tell you this is why I thought like that last episode was so good. It's because that intenseness you see with Ellie after episode 8, like that lingering moment that she keeps going through where she's like essentially going through shock and I guess ennui in a way, like that felt like it was lasting so long, like with me. And I was watching my wife and like we had tears in our eyes like the entire time she was going through this until you see, like as we said before, spoilers, until you see the giraffe and like it puts like a rainbow in the middle of just like this entire disaster that just happened. Like and like the tension was so big, man. Like it was there, and you see like the longing that Joel had for Ellie, like who couldn't save her. Like I get what you're saying. Like it was so fast and intense. Like towards the end of it, like it felt like it was rushed. But like that first 20 minutes, like really, it felt like it was taking an eternity to get like towards the end of it.
Just because you brought up the giraffes, I was watching it. I was like, those are some fake ass giraffes. And then I get on Instagram the next day, and it was at least one real giraffe involved. I was like, holy shit.
Like show what I know.
Right.
That was cool though. You needed that, dude. You needed to see that. It's like something like that in that world, because like the previous episode was.
I knew it was going to get recreated because they had like a single frame in one of the trailers that was like some giraffes walking, and that is one of the most iconic scenes in the. They dropped some of the most iconic. So there's a scene in Bill's town when you're going through as Joel and Bill's alive, and so the booby traps are going off, and you're hung upside down like by your ankle. And clickers are running at you full speed, and you have to shoot them hanging upside down. That's one of the most iconic scenes in the game that just didn't make it to television. And
because how could it? Yeah.
Well, it could. There were multiple times where I'm like, oh, so they're just going to move that scene over here and do it like that.
We'll just come back to that one later. Yeah, no, never did. Never came back.
Never came back. Unfortunately. R.I.P. to that beautiful scene.
Let me ask you that. Like you being like the hardcore gaming fan, like, and we got like more stuff to talk about this when it comes to this, but was that like the most disappointing part? Like they took out from the game into this? Like was that like the biggest part for it? Like you said, like I wish they would have showed me more of this. I wish I could have seen a little bit more just like from the game in the show. Was that like the biggest one for it? Was there other points?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, because I hear like a lot of fans like there's two different people who watch the show. People who play the game, people who didn't play the game, and like I'm in the category essentially of people who didn't play the game, because as I talked about, the first 15 minutes is all I saw. But like you played it multiple times on different consoles, and you've seen it inside and out. Like so, like like all the Easter eggs that we're going to be talking about also. So it's like something kind of caught your eye, that like you wanted to see.
There were things that I hoped, like there's a sub-story, the Ishmael sub-story, and I was hoping they would adapt some of that for television, because it's really told through collectibles and through like notes and stuff you pick up through the game, and they reference it in the show. That's one of the Easter eggs, is that Ish is written on the wall, and they kind of reference that, but that was something that they didn't actually go into that I felt like they could have gone into, because that's a really interesting story. But we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
What's going on, guys? My name is Nemo, and you probably know me as Who is Nemo on TikTok. And I just want to take some time out today to talk about a very special podcast. Now, that podcast is FTO Nerd Talks. Now, FTO is a podcast that gives you daily updates on all things pop culture. So, if you're into anime, manga, comic books, TV shows, movies, and all that good stuff, FTO is the podcast for you. Now, I know what you're all thinking. There are so many podcasts out there that already do the same thing, and I'm about to tell you why FTO is so special. Now, FTO is so special because they emphasize on Black nerd culture. Not only that, if you like to be interactive with your favorite content creators, FTO is the special podcast for you. Now, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you just want to state your opinion about a certain project, they will engage with you. So if you haven't already, please go follow FTO Nerd Talks on all social media platforms. And if you haven't already, please do me a favor, follow them on Apple Music and Spotify so you don't miss out on their weekly podcasts. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Let's run that back, because I went live instead of started recording. So, misclick buttons happen to the best of us, and the last of us.
And the last of us.
So we're back for part 2 of our Last of Us HBO full season 1 spoiler cast.
Dude, you can't have me laughing when we come back. We're gonna think I'm a fucking psycho. Why is he laughing about this sad show?
Hey, you just gotta play a good commercial.
There it is.
Give him the Georgia Lottery Jumbo Bucks one. Hit him with that. Hit him with that signature FTO Nerd Talk classic right there.
Oh my gosh, you got me with that one. You got me with that one. We were talking about like character that died. God, that's not a good segue. And we were talking about Tess. Like Tess died. There was a lot of characters that died in the show, but Tess was one of the first ones we saw in the show, like persons that we got a connection with that died. And it was you said it was much different in the game than it was inside the show. The show like she had like a sit and wait with all the clickers, and like she just blew them all up. It was very emotional, very TV. But the game, she kind of went out like a badass, right?
Right. So in the game, so in the show, we know they were being chased by infected, and Tess essentially stayed back, had that weird cordyceps kiss that felt totally unnecessary. Kind of took the wind out of a lot of what was going on there. Like, I'm like, if you're going to blow it up, like, blow it up. Like, and then there were grenades there. Joel and Ellie could have taken some grenades, like,
sexualizing for like no reason. Yeah.
Right. So in the game, they're being chased by Fedra, and Tess essentially, she's already been bit at this point, and she stays and she has a last stand shootout with Fedra to stall them out so Joel and Ellie have a chance to escape. And and it's technically the second death in the show and the game, because the first death is Sarah. And the first episode, that death, I knew it was gonna hurt. Like, we talked about this on Table Chiefs before. I just goddamn knew it. I've played this game twice. I've played the beginning of this game like 5 times.
Yeah. I think I keep blocking on her death, man. Like, that's how much it gets to me, because like it didn't need to happen, and like it's the most meaningless death in like the entire show, and like I think that's what like set Joel on his like crazy path that he went on, and like I feel like I blocked that out.
It's a catalyst for the Joel that we get post time skip. It is like that. That's the event that sets that character into motion.
Because she didn't need to die. She didn't have to die. Like, none of it was necessary, and she did. And like,
but it was a great great way of showing that the world is ruined. Like, we are in a dark, dangerous, like, broken time.
Yeah.
And
let me ask you this part. What did you think about the opening of the show?
Oh, so, and I really wish they would have done this more. The first 2 episodes, right, had those like interstitial kind of like treating it like an anthology of like having these, what was going on in other places, other times, like building out the world, because those reinforce the world in the way that I've wanted from the game for a long time. And that's one thing that the show, we talked before the break about things that it didn't do as well, or did do it for me. In the final episode, Ellie's mom, that's something we've never seen before. I talked about the Bill and Frank thing being something we had never seen before. And then the intro to the first and the second episode are just entirely TV original, like, but they build out the world and like flesh out the lore in a way, like with so little, they make it like the impact of the story, like going in knowing what I knew of playing the entirety of The Last of Us Part 1 and The Last of Us Part 2 and Left Behind as the DLC for Part 1 and playing a considerable amount of Factions multiplayer. They found
a way to make it fresh for you, is what you're telling me, huh?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things I will, because Craig Mazin had to have had a lot of his hands, and that was because I know Neil Druckmann's storytelling style at this point. I've played enough Naughty Dog games and modern Naughty Dog games to understand kind of how Neil Druckmann is going to tell a story. And it's high quality, but it's these additional things that I feel like Craig Mazin, like I feel like those kind of fell more onto him as far because I haven't seen Chernobyl.
Who's also a fan of the game. He talked about that quite like he's also a fan of that game. Also, he talked about that quite a few times, like in like the scene, the behind the scenes episodes of each episode. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are actually really interesting when hearing them talk about the clickers, and you actually have in the notes you talk about the big clicker, which we got to call it by its actual name, the bloater.
All right.
So that enemy class is the bloater in the game. That's one of the enemies you fight right before you. So you're in Billstown and you're in a gym in the school, and that's where you first encounter a bloater. And
I gotta tell you, my wife was the one who told me about what that character is. A woman who only game that she plays on a constant is Crash Bandicoot and Mario 3. Like those are her go-to games.
Crash Bandicoot's a Naughty Dog game, so that lineage is there.
But she's the one who told me about the bloater. Like I'm like first off, how the hell you know about this? Secondly, they're what? Like she said, like they just been sitting down there for so long, like building up like so much, like it's hard to take them down, it's hard to kill them. So like you just got to keep on shooting them and trying to take them down the entire time. Like so that's why it was so big. That's why like it was hard for like all of them to kill it, and that's why it was so strong, just slapping them all over the place like that. Dude, that took me for a loop, man.
Oh yeah, the bloaters there are no joke in the game.
They are not.
And
they weren't a joke in the show either, man.
There's an enemy. This is a spoiler for Last of Us Part 2.
We warned you.
Yeah.
We warned you.
There's an enemy called the Rat King, which they go into the hospital that was the first case of cordyceps in the United States in The Last of Us Part 2. And The Last of Us Part 2 takes place even further along in the timeline, obviously, than The Last of Us series. So the first person who probably in the entire United States who ever contracted cordyceps in its fictionalized form, because it's a real fungus. That's the thing. I don't know, like, I've seen it literally here in my parents' yard. I saw a spider that like had crawled out onto a leaf and had fungus grow out of it because it had been infected by cordyceps.
God, I hope that shit doesn't happen in our world. Like, do we need it to happen? I don't know. That's a conversation for a different time. But
fortunately for us, diseases have a harder time transferring through species, even though coronavirus showed us.
It can happen. It can happen. You talked about Ashley Johnson in passing quite a few times about how, like, you know, she could have been played by anyone else, and you know how she was also playing Ellie's mom in the last episode. We gotta talk about that because like Ashley Johnson is a treasure, sir, and I've been following her career for a very long time, and she won quite a few awards for playing Ellie inside of this.
Yeah.
Like from what I've seen of her, like in some of these like these side by sides, like she killed it. She did a great job in the game, and I want to know like why you think, first off, why she could have been replaced inside of this, and two, why
I don't think.
I don't.
Right. So one of the criticisms about the original game, and I have to handle this because I don't want to inadvertently like offend or it's a delicate topic that I'm not.
Damn right it is. Right it is.
The original design for Ellie looked like Elliot Page.
Right.
And so they changed the character to look more like Ashley Johnson because PlayStation also had a game starring Elliot Page coming out the same year, Beyond Two Souls. And so,
Elliot was not very happy about that likeness of that game, like with them like being referenced to. Like, so yeah, that was a big thing. Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of one of those last minute like final hours of game development was changing the character model from looking like their original vision of this character that looked like Elliot Page, but then now the version we got looked more like Ashley Johnson, and then Bella Ramsey plays Ellie so well that having that final episode and having Ashley Johnson play Ellie's mom, and
Real was chef's kiss. Real was chef's kiss. Like
was,
that's the other question I was gonna ask. What did you think about Ashley Johnson playing her mom inside of this? That was the other question I was gonna ask you.
Yeah, so Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, their roles in the show, both of them over delivered. And it's because they understand the impact of these characters. They were these characters. They understood these characters before even the diehard fans like me understood these characters. And it was their performances in the first place that elevated this story into just one of the great narratives of all time.
So, all right, I'll get off my finger wagging, and that is very well said, very very well said. Like you hit a lot of buttons on that one, and I completely agree with you about that, because like man, they killed it.
Yeah, and we knew going in, and I'm kind of glad that they held back on using those actors until the latter half of the season. Because we knew that from the beginning that they were going to be in it. We didn't know what characters they were going to be. And they could have been throwaway characters in the Sam and Henry arc of just like the one character who her brother died, and then she kind of took over the militia group. Her right-hand man could have been Troy Baker as easily as Troy Baker became the right-hand man later on in the season. And like those two characters that were hunting Sam and Henry could have been replaced with Troy and Ashley. And kind of when they started going in that direction, I thought that they would be kind of like, throwaway extras, like gang member number 3, kind of like throwaway roles. But the fact that they actually both had speaking lines, and then Ashley's performance, just like those are the best parts of the show, the things that we didn't get to have in the game that are just additive. And for Ashley to be one of those that, I don't know if you heard, after the season ended, Troy Baker and Neil Druckmann kind of did a press tour talking about
they did a podcast too, right?
Well, yeah, they did a podcast week to week, but then they started going out, and I don't know if you got to listen to, like, I know Kind of Funny had Neil Druckmann on for their spoiler cast of the final episode. And he talked about how that was a concept for a game that they were going to give to an external studio, was the story of Ellie's birth. And
they didn't say what company was going to get that game done. I think Greg Miller talked to him about that. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
So they said that Greg put them in contact with the studio, and I got to look up the name of the studio, but it's the developer of Gone Home and Tacoma.
But we weren't exactly sure what that studio was, but I guess like some fans did some research.
Well, for just judging by the time frame, like, because I've been following Greg Miller's career for years, like, Greg Miller and Colin Moriarty are the two. They are the two that are the reason that I am podcasting today. So
there you go. I will say though for Baker that I didn't realize it was him until the very end, until like his character had died, and I wonder like why are they pausing the camera on like this character that died, because it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I knew from like,
because you know what he looks like, you thought you seen him in other games. You may have seen like him portrayal as the Joker. I know he did like the Joker also in like the Arkham.
Well, yeah, I mean Troy Baker is just kind of one of the.
Been around for a while.
He's the same way we talk about like how Henry Cavill is like everybody. He's all your favorite characters. Troy Baker is a lot of your favorite characters when it comes to video games.
Games, yeah, agreed. And like I didn't recognize him because I wasn't as familiar with his face as say like Nolan North. When I saw him in like Deadpool, I knew I was looking at Nolan North, but I didn't recognize him in this show until like after like he had died and that freeze frame was there and that was him. And when it came to Ashley Johnson, recognized her right away, like immediately recognized her, and like I love how they made her look like Bella Ramsey inside the show also.
The thing is, Bella Ramsey is just playing a character that was originally played by Ashley Johnson.
Exactly.
So it kind of circles back to when we were talking about God of War, where Christopher Judge, like, while it would be great, it would also be great to find like a more contemporary actor that can embody that character that Christopher Judge gave his performance to build it up. So I know we talked about these other PlayStation shows.
I remember.
And Ashley Johnson, like, if you guys want to give her a really big role in a really big series, she could play Aloy, and she'd probably make Aloy a more interesting character than Aloy is in the game.
Instead of a robot type character,
just like a very bland.
It was.
And I mean,
like a bowl of cornflakes, man. No, I get you. I'm right there with you.
Right. So
you don't even need to explain it. I completely understand. Like she is not the most interesting character. It was cool to see Lance Reddick in that game also because like he definitely was a breath of fresh air to that game and for that character.
Well, yeah, rest in peace, Lance Reddick. Commander Zavala. I
didn't even make it sad. I apologize. Man. Sorry, man. Yeah, I like the whole thing with Kevin Conroy and me also. I get it completely. Sorry.
Right. That was one of those voice talents that it's like everywhere. Just thinking about your face, your name, your anything, and I can hear your voice echoing through. We've stepped into a war with the Cabal on Mars. Like
that's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I feel you, man. Like
I'm hearing literal voice lines being performed by this dude in my head just thinking about it.
I get that way with Keith David all the time. I hear Keith David's voice. That's Keith David. I know it. You hear it. That's Keith. Whew. They mean like to go more sad, talking like while we're talking about a sad TV show / video game. Sorry about that, guy. God.
So, one of the things I see you wanted to talk about was the introduction of Joel and Ellie.
There we go.
And personally, like having that extra time in the first episode because I played after the conclusion of season 1. I started up playing The Last of Us Part 1. I had the 2-hour free trial on PlayStation, and I played about the first hour and 5 minutes of the game over.
Okay.
And realizing how much more that first episode of the show built out Joel, because the same way in the show it kind of focuses around Sarah for the beginning, like the first character you play, the first time you have like movement on your sticks, right, is Sarah in the game. So but there were more scenes of Joel and Tommy and Sarah and just all of those initial characters before like the outbreak really hit. Like it was already, like we know that it was already going on and it was already spreading, but until like the impact was felt from it, being introduced to Joel and having that more time and just like a bit more of
expansion.
Yeah. And just having that more of because there were a lot of time and place things that were happening because it was 2002?
Right. It was very early on. Yeah.
Right. And so he was talking about being on Atkins diet, and then they actually explained in the lore that the way cordyceps travel to humans in the show world is through wheat. So the fungus infected like the food supply essentially, and since Joel was on Atkins, he wouldn't have
been a part of that.
Right, wouldn't have been eating as many carbs. Diet.
Gotcha.
So just like small detail and like the Desert Storm sticker on the truck and like certain very time and place things and like having those just additional details about the character Joel, the way he was introduced was really good.
You got to see like he was a little bit crass, but like Sarah kept him honest. Like in this. Yeah. Like he wanted to be a dick and jerk to people. Like his daughter kept him not from being like that.
Right. And so Joel in the show, I feel like his introduction was done a little bit better than the game.
Yeah.
Ellie, on the other hand, and I mean, this might be the first time I was introduced to Ellie was a decade ago. And so for me, she was still like a foul mouth, like just like rebellious kid, like through both iterations. It just felt like the show. I don't know. I feel like the relationship in the show, because of the stuff with Tess, because of the stuff like with Joel, because Joel, that whole interaction with the Fedra agent in the QZ, where he kills.
What's supplying him? Oh, that part. Okay.
Yeah, where he kills him to protect Ellie, essentially, because they're going to test her.
Right.
And they knew she was a bit like. For me, in the game, the introduction of Ellie, I feel like they put a bigger space between Joel and Ellie to start, and that's part of the reason why I feel like their relationship was rushed and didn't have the time to develop, is because I feel like they started them off further apart and got them a lot closer together a lot faster in the show than they did in the game.
That's how I took it. All right. I took that completely different. I took it like they did do that, like separate them like a lot for like the time skips that we got to see like for months at times. Right. You get to see like the winter, the climate change also, like, and even still through all that, you still heard Joel refer to her like as cargo, as like as like your mission. Like it wasn't until like certain things started happening to Ellie that you started to see like that bondness between them started to grow a little bit more. Like, and so like I liked the separation between those two, and the fact that Ellie was a kid and trying to get herself closer to Joel, and like them slowly bring us to that point with the time jumps, with the interaction with other characters, and with like the meeting of Tommy. Like I feel like Tommy really cemented their bond with each other. Like meeting Tommy like really brought them full circle together.
To just talk about Tommy as a character for a second.
Gotcha. Well, it's on the topic. Let's get into it.
Because of The Last of Us Part 2 and some of the events in that game, I resent Tommy. Like, Tommy caused some of the moments that made me the most mad with The Last of Us Part 2 are directly Tommy's fault.
He's not the smartest
Spoilers
guy, no.
Again for The Last of Us Part 2. Tommy gets shot in the head, and Tommy should have died there, and he didn't. We see this dude get shot direct, like headshot, getting sniped on a bridge. He shouldn't have come back. If Tommy had died where Tommy should have died in that story,
you would have been okay with that.
There were decisions that Ellie made because of Tommy that I did not agree with, and it's like, Tommy,
you gotta sit down, dude. Just go sit down.
And I mean, those things probably won't happen until season 3 or possibly even 4 of the show.
Oh, you think it'll be that long? Wow.
Well, I know that the first game, they had to kind of rush it to prove themselves and to tell it in this one season. The first game could have been 2 seasons because of just the runtime of the game and having a lot of those smaller interactions, having more screen time with these characters could have gone a long way. But now that they have the rope to hang themselves with potentially, and with the story structure of the second game, easily the second game will be 2 seasons. Easily.
Gotcha.
And that's why I say it could possibly be 3, and then with the time frame of how long these take to make, we possibly could have the game of The Last of Us Part 3 out, because that's something that they've talked about, is that they have a plan for The Last of Us Part 3. The Last of Us Part 2 leaves off in a place much more than the original Last of Us. Because the original Last of Us could have ended with that okay from Ellie that we got at the end of the show.
Yeah.
And could have ridden off into the sunset.
That could have been like the end of the show, yeah.
Yeah, that could have been the end of the game series, too. It could have just been a one-off, but The Last of Us Part 2 had that uphill battle of proving that, like, after this 10 out of 10 almost perfect story, why do we need to come back to these characters? Why do we need to come back to this world? And it gives you those reasons very early on. So
wow, I feel like you talking about ending. We could probably end the podcast right there. That's a great way to put that. I like that. But there's still more show. We still got more to talk about.
I'm like, oh crap! Which of these notes do I absolutely have to hit?
Kansas City is like one that really stuck out to me because like I was very surprised to see like they did this thing of switching out Pittsburgh for Kansas City to talk about the Henry and Sam situation. So we got like 4 topics we can talk about at one time. Like what was your thoughts on like on switching out like Pittsburgh to Kansas City? And like, how was like the interaction with Sam and Henry in your eyes, like in the game compared to, like to the show?
Well, Sam and Henry, I said it earlier. Sam and Henry, Sam was the younger brother, right?
Right.
And Henry was the older brother. So Sam's character was a lot more developed and made it hurt a lot more. And having the actor who actually used ASL like to communicate to add that layer because Sam was just like a regular kid in the game. He wasn't deaf.
Just no disabilities? Okay.
Or, well, he wasn't deaf in the show either. He was mute. But just having that added dimension just kind of made it, and like the actor's portrayal, I feel like because we got a full episode with those characters, like we have a couple combat encounters with them, and there are some things that are mirrored, like Joel being up in the house and sniping down, and like providing cover fire for them to get through. Some of those things are ripped directly from the game. And as far as the setting, I feel like this wasn't the only place in the story where they had story beats from the game just happened in a different location. And like I said, there have been big twists like with the Bill twist, but small twists like with the Tess twist. So until the final moment between Sam and Henry, I was wondering if it was going to happen the same way.
Because we talked about this in a phone call a couple of days ago, yeah.
So
I mean, like, let's just like talk about the elephant in the room. Like, Sam gets infected. Ellie tries to rub her blood on his wound to heal him.
Which she doesn't do in the game. That's not like, that's kind of like seems like Bella Ramsey's portrayal of the character.
Okay.
More than the original, like, Ashley Johnson portrayal of the character.
It was a very kid thing to do in my eyes. Like I felt like it was a very kid thing to do. Like, and like it really did like really set that moment, that tone for what was going on. And like the fact that like, you know, afterwards, like he did change, and like, you know, he got shot by his brother, and then like his brother took his own life afterward. Like that, I gotta tell you,
that moment of feeling the gravity of the situation and just being unable to proceed on after knowing what you did and that you had to do what you did.
Yeah. It was rough, dude. It was rough. But with that, let me take a small break, and we'll be right back.
All right.
And we're back. Sorry about that. A little impromptu change that happened here, but like we were talking about Henry and Sam, talking about like how like the pressure and the tension of Henry like having to kill his own brother, like it was overwhelming for me. He took his own life, and you were telling me about how that played in the game world.
Right.
Like, was it similar?
Yes, it was extreme. Like Sam and Ellie, I don't feel like had the same level of connection in the game that they had in the show, because that was one of the great things they did with the show is like Ellie was just kind of your AI companion through the game, but having Ellie have more agency, having Ellie be able to stand on her own as like a character earlier on than she did in the game. I feel like having that moment with Sam trying to heal him and trying to like knowing that she's secure and
Right.
knowing that Sam had been bit and that she was potentially his only chance. And
Ooh.
to have that emotional moment of seeing her like kind of fail and kind of be be powerless in that situation just kind of made that thing hurt even more.
She had to eat it, and like at the very end, like when they're standing at his grave, at both of their graves, like you see her eat it, and like just tell her, like we got to keep going. Like, let's just like let's keep going. Like because I don't want that to happen to anybody else ever again. Yeah.
Right, and so there were two more things I wanted to talk about. The one I wanted to talk about was the theme of love throughout because
like that was the theme of the entire story. Like you may have like a different interpretation, but I feel like that was the theme of the story. Like was love.
Every episode had a different kind of love, whether it be a love for your brother, a love for your daughter, a love for
power, even. Yeah.
Right. It was
like
always
with Mallory. Yeah. Like she had a. I feel like she was a complicated like sort.
Well, she was a show original character. She wasn't in the games at all.
No, not even a little bit.
Right, but having her kind of back up that reinforcement of love and like feeling the need for love from her people, and then having the zealots and like having the twisted things people will do for like the community that they love and
bro, like when they asked like where they got this meat from, and like you put two and two together, like wait a minute,
I knew going in, and I hated everything about what was going on. I was like, oh, this is
what? No, thank you. Oh my gosh, man! And like the kid had to eat her own dad. Like what the? Are you serious?
The whole town ate her dad.
Gosh, man! Like and you know they knew it. You know they all knew what they were doing.
People knew.
Oh come on!
I mean that was kind of one of the things that they talked about after the episode was out was not even the people making the food knew. It was only the people who were actually doing the butchering or had like a certain level of power in the community that knew. Because if everybody knew, they would have known they were eating the girl's dad. And nobody knew. And if you look at the scene, Troy Baker talked about it. The people who knew in the scene were hesitant to eat the food, but the people who didn't know were scarfing it down because they were hungry and they just knew that was just their next meal. And so they didn't know that they were eating human flesh, but the ones that did know, like in that scene, you can see all the characters in the dining hall when food is served. The ones that knew hesitated. The ones that didn't know chowed down.
Like I'm big like in the film, and like I see certain things when I just see film that time now. Like so, like that's why they panned it like with everyone's face as they were eating the food. I didn't even put that together. Oh my god, that's morbid as hell. Good. Yeah. That episode really messed me up though. So
the added context of the fact that
there's more. Oh great.
Well, he was a teacher. Like that wasn't something I put together until after the fact. Like when he tried to do what he tried to do to Ellie.
Yeah.
And he's like, you should know that fighting it like is my favorite part. Like
this isn't the first time he's done this.
Well, there were hints and stuff, but the conversation of like, you used to be a teacher and now you're a preacher. Why? Because it rhymes. And then thinking about the fact that this guy would have been in an environment pre the fall of humanity, where he was probably doing some of the exact same things. Like, it's just
disturbing.
Yeah, extremely it made you hate that character and feel good when he died.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because my God, he did not need to survive in that world at all.
Well, he didn't need to survive in any world.
No, he didn't.
Right. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, so we talked about the theme of love and that being a running theme. And so just piggybacking off of that, the theme of the original game was love.
Right.
And into the lead up to The Last of Us Part 2, they say if Last of Us Part 1 is love, Last of Us Part 2 is about hate. And as somebody who's played that story and understand, just go in knowing that in the same way they show all the facets and the diversity and the different kinds of love in this first season, going forward they're going to be showing the different kinds and different facets and the different perspectives of hate. Hate for yourself, hate for the world around you, hate for specific people, for hatred over decisions that were made and actions that were taken.
And so the next season get more intense. I'm understating.
The internet is not ready for the first episode of The Last of Us Part 2. They're not ready. There are people that I know IRL that just played the first hour of The Last of Us Part 2 and said, fuck this, I am out.
That bad?
Yeah. People who are as big or bigger fans of the original Last of Us as me.
Couldn't do it.
Just some of the decisions some of the hate that immediately starts permeating through those characters, through those storylines.
Dude, it gets that raw in the second game?
Yeah. I'm definitely not spoiling how it opens, and I'm going to kind of... Yeah. I'll let... if you want to go watch it, I'd say go watch it. I've played it. I know. So, the last thing I want to touch on is the last episode. That rage, I'm not asking questions. I'm not taking prisoners. Everybody between me and Ellie are dying. That really captured that entire hospital scene from the game. Because when you're going through the hospital in the game, you're not taking prisoners. It is right. And so I remember finding out there's a scene at the end where Joel goes into the room, shoots the doctor, and in the show he lets the nurses survive.
I was telling my wife, they have to come back in the second season to tell Ellie what actually happened in that room. They have to.
Well, Ellie finds out a lot of things between The Last of Us Part 1 and 2. So, we'll leave that there, but me being Joel, not asking any questions, I didn't know killing the nurses was optional in the game. I busted in the room and I shot the doctor and I shot both the nurses and grabbed Ellie and walked out. And I didn't, it wasn't like a fail state. It wasn't like your choice here matters. It wasn't anything like that. Those nurses were non-hostile NPCs that you could have killed or not killed, but just in that moment of no, I gotta do this, playing that game, experiencing it, and it wasn't until years after I played the game, because I get in that room and everybody, all three of those bodies are hitting the floor in my playthrough, and so it was interesting them referencing that in the show and leaving the nurses alive. But the thing is, they did have that lingering shot on the doctor that had been shot, and that's important because that doctor plays a vital role in some of the hatred in The Last of Us Part 2.
It seems like the person playing the game like put some hatred in the second game also. Like if killing the nurses were optional, it seems like that hate carries with you from the last game into the second game because like you chose to kill the nurses, and if you find out they survived in the second one, that hate's on you now. Like you put that on yourself to do that. That's wild.
Yeah, that's one of the running themes of The Last of Us Part 2 is I strangled this person to death, but seeing this person from the other side, like, out of hatred, I strangled this person to death. But from the other side, this person had friends, had a family, had, like, a community that they were just trying to survive and trying to get by with. And
yeah, I didn't have to do that. Like, it seems like the ghost of Sarah came back to haunt you in that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Didn't mean to go so deep on you, but like that's what it seems like. It seems like, you know, the whole thing that happened with Sarah like just came flooding back into your actions, and like the last part of you trying to save this kid that you didn't want to get connected to in the first place. Like, damn, that's dark and deep.
Oh yeah, like if you go and watch MK Ice and Fire's video on the left, because you asked me what I recommend people do after watching the show. And
yes.
Like, if they have access to a PS4 or a PS5, should they go replay play The Last of Us Part 1 or The Last of Us Remastered, any iteration of the first story? And I think, especially after that final episode, the answer is no. Go straight into The Last of Us Part 2, continue that story, see some of the repercussions of some of the actions that Joel took in the first game that you didn't even realize. Like, there were things that happened in the first season of the show that will be... They're going to have the flashback scene of Joel doing what Joel did that you saw on screen but didn't interpret, like, the gravity of some of the things he did. That will be paid off in The Last of Us Part 2.
All right, so Anton just told all of you to kick rocks to a palate cleanser and just go guns blazing right into the second game and don't worry about nothing. Like, you know what?
If you're gonna if you're gonna continue down this road, if you're going to feel that pain, don't feel it again with the game. Like, you can probably go back and play the first game at any point later on, but for me, I like continuing the story. Like, Attack on Titan during the final season went on break for 1 week, and I went and I got the manga and read all the way to the end of the series because I just could not. I always want to, like, for stories I really care about, I always want to progress them. Like, I want to see as far down the road as I can see.
You're a wild man. Well, for me, I really like corn, so that's my take on all of this. Like, a big banana, it's got the juice.
It's got the juice.
See, celebrity. We got celebrity in the show. We needed it. I think we got like a lot more notes to talk about, but I think I'm done. We just talked about the end of the show. Is there anything else you want to get into this? Because I think I'm done, man.
Definitely got in, and some of your questions really, like, I appreciate you for having me think about the show and the game in ways that I hadn't thought about them before. And I'm glad we got to do this. I know it wasn't like the second the final episode dropped, we were immediately in people's podcast feeds, but, you know, it's here now, and I feel like it's given people time to watch the show at their own pace.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. If you haven't watched and you made it this far, go watch that show. It's great. Or go play the game. Those are the people that are listening. Go play The Last of Us Part 1, or go watch The Last of Us HBO. But if you watched Season 1 and didn't play the first game, you got the story, you got the broad strokes, go play the second game.
Let's go play Part 2. Let's go play Part 2. If I'm gonna watch the first 15 to 20 minutes of Part 2, you can do it. You can do it. If I come back, we got like another podcast we're gonna do in a couple of days or tomorrow, whichever time like you guys listening to this. And by that time, I should have watched the first 20 minutes of The Last of Us Part 2, and I may yell at Anton. So just throwing it out there.
Fair warning, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah. Son of a bitch. I'm not playing it. I'm not playing it. So I gotta keep telling myself. But like, dude,
I mean, the opening part of that is very cutscene heavy, and so the things that happen to lead into you, because you play as Ellie in the second game. Like, you get that brief moment in the first game where Joel is incapacitated and you play as Ellie and do all the stuff as far as like that entire town, like all of that where Ellie was on her own, you were playing as Ellie on her own in the game. And so Last of Us Part 2, you play the entirety of the game as Ellie. Spoilers, not the entirety of the game, but
okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that's ominous. All right, that game itself is just ominous. So yeah, I think
I wish I had a physical copy of The Last of Us Part 2, but I had gone all digital by the time it came out.
So things change, man. Things change. All right. My last takeaway from this: if I had a scale, always scale things in 5s when it comes to rating stuff. I would give this. I don't do points either. So, man, like it has to be like a hard 4, like a hard 4. Yeah, out of 5.
Yeah, and I typically do out of 10, but since we're in front of your listenership, in front of your viewership, I'll stick with it. I won't do any point anythings. I'm giving it a 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's gold standard, man. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is must watch, like dark adult fiction, you know?
Damn. That's big. That's big. Damn.
And I mean, there's a lot of bias. Like I said, bought this game multiple times. I have Last of Us like merch. This poster back here is a Rick and Morty version of the cover of The Last of Us Part 1. And so like, yeah, for me, the game was huge. Like it, and then the show, they made all the right calls all the way through production and through shooting and there were just so many right calls made that there were so few instances, like I said, nothing's perfect, nothing is immaculate, nothing is without its faults and without its blemishes and without its downsides. But I feel like the upsides and the positives and like the accolades that this game deserves and this show deserves, like far outweigh any negative aspects, and any negative aspects that I've found about it are minor. So for me, it definitely deserves a 5 out of 5.
I literally did not think you were gonna come into this with that attitude. Like, no joke. I thought like you were gonna come here like talking about like how all the things you don't fucking like, how like I wish that was better, like how they could like change all of this, like it was good, but was it really that good? I thought that was gonna be like the energy you came here with. Like, you completely surprised me, especially that 5 out of 5, bro. Damn, like respect, right on.
And yeah, and for me, like I consume a lot of TV and a lot of movies, and it takes usually something special to have something stand out enough for me to evangelize it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I'll evangelize games, like, I can kind of more... And when I recommend games, I try to tune in more to the person I'm talking to directly. Of be like,
makes sense.
I get that you're into this X, Y, and Z. And there are only a few games that I feel like are blanket statements of just, like, everybody should at least give this a try. I feel like everybody should at least watch The Last of Us HBO series.
Right on. Damn. All right. From your lips, man.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
So,
like, I'm glad we did this. This is like I see like a whole passion inside of you right now. I like it. This is very very different.
Yeah, I'm fun loving, and I try and be the hippie kind of like vibey guy, but I can be serious sometimes. I can lock it in.
I like it.
I can batten down the hatches,
Right on, man.
All right. So this has been another episode of Table Cheese. I'm Anton Sixxx. You can follow me around the internet, cheesycontrollerpodcast.com. Please click that Discord button. If you're listening to this and you made it this far, cheesycontrollerpodcast.com. Click that Discord button. Get up-to-the-minute gaming news. Tap into one of the greatest communities online, one of the greatest communities of color, one of the greatest communities of nerds. Just
you guys are always talking about something. Always.
Yeah, any of the attributes that you could want out of a community, except for lack of diversity, if that's your bag, like right? you can find with us.
And I'm D of FTO Nerd Talk. Wherever you find FTO Nerd Talk, just follow, subscribe. Also, big news. I'm announcing this first on this podcast. Any other 10,000 followers on Instagram. I don't know how the hell that happened. Yeah, hey, I appreciate that. Like, I didn't think it was ever gonna happen. Like, this is just like
hey,
all right.
You're getting your flowers, and for me, as like a newer listener and like collaborator and everything, like between episode 300, 10,000 followers, like you've been putting in the work to deserve these numbers that you've been getting.
I feel like I broke like the Matrix or something, so it feels weird to me. But this has been great. We got to do this again. We got to pick a different show to do this on for sure.
I'm thinking there has to be something else coming up that I'm really. We could do it about the Tetris movie, because that's the next video game adaptation that I'm really looking forward to, and that's coming out next week. So.
And that has like a whole big story and scandal behind it too. So yeah, like not the movie itself, but like the Tetris like story itself has like a whole big scandal behind it, and like it's a little comedic. I keep saying it's a little bit comedic, but like it's comedic but serious at the same time. So yeah,
right. It's a dramatization of like what I'm sure was just a bunch of dudes in suits in boardrooms having meetings.
Essentially, yeah.
In like the late 80s, early 90s, like real boring stuff, but like this looks like it's going to be a fun ride. And Tetris is one of those games that I love, up there with The Last of Us, for very different reasons and for very different.
I hope so. It was my first game on the Game Boy, bar none. First game I ever played on the Game Boy.
I don't think I have Game Boy Tetris. But I do have NES Tetris, which was just like the home console port of that. So that's one of the few NES cartridges that I have is Tetris.
Thank you, Anton. You just made me show my age. I appreciate that. Anyways, this has been a great show. You're hosting. God.
Well, with that, I'll leave the people with, until next time, keep it cheesy.
And take it easy. Hey guys, D here of FTO Nerd Talk. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, tell your friends about FTO Nerd Talk. Got a lot of different shows for all of you. Make sure you tune in every week for a brand new episode. Take it easy.